Hi, welcome to the New Voting Project. My name is Kanal, your host, and today we're doing things a little bit differently on the show. We'll actually be having a roundtable discussion with the EVC Student Board. And today we actually have a couple of their, fantastic members. I would say they're best members, but maybe they're their only members, but who knows? So today we have Jack Malamud, who is the president of the student board and also Brown Votes. We have Sean Casey, the vice president of the student board and also director of Stanford Votes. And we have Daisy Lane, who is the director of communications and also the chair of Duke Votes. So we have a lot of college students here today to give us their perspectives, and we're really excited. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you all can be incredibly busy, so thank you. I do appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. Also, just super quickly, not actually director of Brown Votes. I was involved. Every vote counts at Brown, but Brown Votes is also a really fantastic voter organization.
Yeah, yeah. I actually had, I think, the president come on the show. So I've heard great things about the organization. I think you all do fantastic things. So it's really great to have you on. And so yeah, let's get into these questions. Just for our viewers, I guess, baseline, talk a little bit about your backgrounds, how you got into voting rights and every vote counts and politics and activism. And I guess beyond that, touch on how your college experiences are going and how they're preparing you for your futures.
Sure, I can go first. I first got started in sort of pro voter uh, advocacy when I was in high school. One of my friends convinced me to join this group called the Youth Progressive Policy Group that was traveling up to Albany to try to pass a bill. I'm from New York. The goal was to try to expand the voting age to 17 in New York State. That bill has not been passed in the New York State House, but it was a really great experience and really opened my eyes to sort of the process of engaging with legislators, how important it is that politicians and lawmakers be receptive to their constituents. And then at Brown, in my sophomore year at college, I got in touch with Campbell through EVC because I had a friend who was involved in the chapter at Yale. I got a bunch of friends involved, starting a chapter at Brown. We've done some really great stuff for the past couple of years. And now I'm super excited to be helping out on the national level. EVC Every Vote Counts is a somewhat young organization, but it's done a lot of really great work, and I'm just really excited to be part of such a, I guess, vibrant network of students on a bunch of different campuses. So it's been a really great experience.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
Okay, I can go next. I don't know. I think civic engagement and voting stuff has been a pretty recent thing for me. When I entered college, I thought I wanted to do computer science and STEM stuff, and I never really. I don't my family isn't a very politically active family, and I never voted and all that kind of stuff. But after my freshman year, my mayor ended up running for president, which was pretty cool. So I took a gap year to work on his campaign just because he was a good guy, not really having much interest in politics and voting otherwise.
Your mayor ended up running for president?
He sure did. He did. Mayor Pete.
Wow, okay. That's a hell of a reason to get started.
He's come a long way, that's for sure. I don't think anyone would have guessed that he would quite reach the heights that he has even a couple of years ago. But
that's
best experience of my life. Clearly we didn't win, but still, I think it was one of those losses that was a win because just from where he started to where he ended, and to this day, met some amazing people, and it got me really excited about civic engagement. So then I went back to Stanford and joined Stanford Votes, and the rest is kind of history. I'm really excited to be helping out with Every Vote Counts and doing some work. Not just on a broader level from our campus, but nationally. So very, very fun journey.
That's pretty cool stuff, man. Glad to hear it.
Yeah, and then I'll go last. So I I grew up in North Carolina from Charlotte, very much a swing state. And I've always been kind of politically aware. My mom and I like always watch the news and stuff. But I didn't like start getting involved in like campaigns and stuff until college. So I came to Duke, which is in Durham, North Carolina, and I volunteered for the Democratic Party for the midterm elections in 2018, just for a few months, kind of in the fall semester, and then my this summer before my sophomore year, I think I volunteered for the Dan McCready congressional campaign and the special election that happened in North Carolina. And so like that was really interesting seeing how seeing how campaigns worked, and getting a little bit more experience there. And then I've also been involved with Duke Votes since my freshman year at Duke. And so it's like a nonpartisan group really dedicated to just expanding voter access and like getting as many people within the Duke community and the Durham community engaged with voting. And so now I serve as chair for that organization. And I think it's been a really great experience, especially learning a lot about student voting and student rights. I'm also a political engagement project fellow at Duke, so kind of a similar vein. And my senior thesis focuses on the intersection of student voting and social media and college students. So I think that learning all these things has been really interesting and a really great springboard, like as I graduate and plan to go kind of work in the political sphere potentially. I don't really know. I don't have a job yet after graduation, but I think, yeah, it's been a really amazing experience. And then serving as director of comms and operations for Every Vote Counts has just been another amazing opportunity to get to connect with people across the country and other student voices who are interested in the same things. So.
Well, y'all are fairly more accomplished than me, so I mean, you're the bar, I guess. It's really here to. I'm especially surprised. I mean, if my mayor decides to run for president, I think I would have no other reason than to join his campaign. But no, it sounds like y'all do incredible work. So keep the good fight going, I guess. And EVC, of course, I've heard is a fantastic organization, and I'm really glad to have you here. Now, my next question kind of strings along that line. At EVC, what are the core values? What are the objectives you're hoping to accomplish? Especially being, youth representatives on a nationally recognized organization. What are you striving to do with that platform?
Absolutely. I'll start this one off too. So, in turn, every vote counts. Our goal is to increase voter engagement and expand voter access. So there are legislative policies that we have stances on. We oppose partisan gerrymandering, restrictive voting laws. We think it should be easier for people to vote. People shouldn't have to wait in line for very long hours. But most of our focus is on the student experience at the campus level. So where we have policy objectives, oftentimes our focus is often on the policies that are implemented by universities themselves. Administrations have a lot of power to make it hard and to make it a lot easier for students to vote, which is extremely important. One of the things I remember reading a while ago is that one of the best indicators of whether anyone will vote in any given election is whether they voted in the previous election. So voting is habit forming, which is great. And if we can really start building that habit earlier of sort of civic engagement at a young age, or people are young adults at least, we can not just turn out the youth, but really build a generation of voters that will persist for years to come. As a national organization of student representatives, we want to help our chapters pursue those policies on their campuses. One of our biggest goals is to help chapters, partners, really anyone in our network pursue institutionalization, which is a really big thing. This is the idea that, universities themselves can adopt policies like putting voter registration forms and orientation, giving students, faculty, and staff the day off on election day to really make it easier for students to get out there, vote, engage in their communities. So yeah, that's what we're about. Sean and Daisy, if you guys want to expand on that too, please do so.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of crushed it, Jack. Happy to echo absolutely everything you said. Really interested in helping to work with the partners and the organizations that we have on different campuses and really like uplift their voices and help them kind of institutionalize voting and best voting practices on their campuses in any way that we can.
Yeah.
I guess the only thing I'd add to that is also like civic engagement stuff on campus can a lot of times be a very like insular thing, like very restricted to your own school and like kind of the ecosystem of the administration and faculty and student activism there. And I think one of BVC's best value adds is the ability to kind of break down those silos and get people on different campuses to actually talk to each other and learn from each other. So I think that's really important.
Yeah. And I think I like to emphasize throughout the course of this show, one thing I found out is that voting is habitual. And I think you hit the point. Whereas, if it's like, they teach us this is my expression. It's not copyrighted, so feel free to use it. Is that they teach us the ABCs when we're in kindergarten, right? Hopefully, for those who have access to education equity, different problem. Maybe I do a separate podcast about that. The same way they need to be teaching us to vote at an early stage, as soon as we turn 18, get pre-registered. I was pre-registered at 16. Not to say everybody should do that, but I just really cared. I wanted to just put a check in that. But if everybody votes at 18, they're more than likely to keep voting for the rest of their life because they know how to vote. They know where to vote in some cases. And if they've formed that, political mind, then they know who to vote for. But that's their prerogative.
Absolutely. One of the things that I also wanted to add in terms of values in particular that I think ties into a lot of this is that I'm not sure if there's, I guess, a pithy way to articulate this, but one of the sort of very old, tired methods of GOTV, turning out the vote, that I think now is becoming abandoned, which is a good thing, is sort of the guilt method, which is trying to tell people that you should be voting, and obviously your vote matters. You're doing a bad thing if you're not voting. And I think that's wrong and also super ineffective for a couple of reasons. But the biggest one is that oftentimes people do have genuine roadblocks in between themselves and the polling places, and oftentimes even when they don't, even when it's mostly their own reservations about how much their vote matters or how much they can really change by participating in civic life, those often are valid reservations, which is one of the reasons why I think like opposing partisan gerrymandering or trying to get these policies passed are to have universities make it easier for students to vote are so important. Because sometimes when people feel like maybe their vote doesn't count as much as it could, or maybe politicians don't listen to them as much as they should, sometimes they're right. And it's our job not to convince people that their vote matters, but to make sure that it actually does. And I think a lot of sort of pro-voter organizations are really adopting that framework, at least in the past few years, which I think is a really wonderful thing to see. And it's just a much better way of really getting people engaged in the political process.
Right. And you all are engaged in the political process, which is great. I think, in my opinion, everybody should be, but I'm really glad to hear that you all are. And on that note, since most of you have campaign experience, which is great, I'm a campaigner as well. So let's talk about the 2020 election. You obviously know the drill. You know how difficult it is to get people out, to knock on doors, to phone bank, to text bank. But give me your thoughts on the year 2020, where we had a pandemic. Most of y'all were probably virtual for school, and we had a historic election top to bottom in several key states. We had Georgia flip. So just give me your thoughts as students on the year 2020 and the election and how you felt.
I'm happy to start with this one. So I think that 2020 was a really difficult election for like the reasons that you just mentioned. Like it was COVID. So like I had friends take semesters off and like go work on campaigns, and then COVID hit and their campaign was kind of like, what? Like we can't do our traditional like methods of voter outreach, which would be like canvassing and like knocking doors. And so I think it was a really amazing time for like innovation within like campaign spheres. I know at Duke Votes we pivoted to doing a lot of like relational organizing, which is a big thing where it's like you would do like virtual couch parties, like really like trying to like not profit, but like utilize those like personal connections that you have with people. And exactly as Jack was saying, not shame people into voting, but instead of like extending grace and trying to like open a dialogue and say, okay, well, why do you not want to vote? Like, what are these roadblocks that you're facing and how can we help you like overcome those roadblocks? And I think that 2020 was a great learning curve for that one. And I think that at least in my spheres, like it was a great opportunity to like capitalize on relational organizing and finding new ways to like overcome traditional barriers to voting, and like maybe shift energies in places that otherwise would not have been like found if we had like focused so hard on like traditional canvassing methods.
I think 2020 also kind of showed me that like traditional organizing is really important. But one of the best ways like to actually get people to vote is like by changing like the institutions they're part of. Um, like, I think a lot of people see voting as something that's like an extra, nice extra thing to do, but like not something that if it's super difficult, they're gonna put too much effort in. So to the extent that like within an institution, you can bring voting closer to where students are, I think that's really important. Something we did at Stanford is we put like a hold on people's like the way they sign up for classes. It's called access. And we put like an access hold on their accounts until they click through a screen that asks them to register to vote. And kind of like literally like
Wow.
within like a week of putting that in, like around class registration, like 80% of the school was registered, which is crazy. And I think it just goes to show that like you know most people, like very few people are like super like I'm against voting. Like I just like very explicitly do not want to vote. It's just something that they won't go out of their way to do. So to the extent that organizations can kind of close that gap, I think that's where we can be the most valuable.
Yeah, that seems a little authoritarian, but I mean, it worked out.
So it's a you click through. It's saying acknowledge like like
okay.
here is a pane within the web application where you could register to vote if you want. If you don't want, you just click next. It's not you must register to vote
Oh,
to enroll in
okay.
classes
All
at
right.
Stanford University.
Either way,
Important distinction.
either way, I think it worked out. So Jack, I think you were about to say something.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was gonna echo everything Sean and Daisy said. I think it really demonstrated how important that sort of a blend of you need to do the real organizing work. You need people who are reaching out to people, getting them to the polling places. You can't do it without that. You also, just as Sean said, there's so much stuff that institutions can and need to do to make voting easier, and there are always some things also that you can't really organize your way out of. State purges its voting roll. That's not much you can do about that except really make sure that whoever the politicians are who did that don't show up after the next election. One of I guess, some more positive other things that I was really happy to see during 2020, because obviously going into August, September, at least at my school, we knew that everything was going to be totally remote. There weren't going to be a ton of people on campus. We were a little worried about how we were going to be able to reach students if we couldn't physically see them. So we did exactly as Daisy mentioned, like virtual couch parties, stuff like that, virtual canvassing. I was nervous about people's willingness to sign up, how much work we have to put in just to recruit people. But the first time we posted sort of our volunteer recruitment, or really our organizer recruitment, we got a ton of responses right off the bat, having done very little work to promote it, which really demonstrated how much of a desire there was from students and youth in 2020, not just to vote, but to help their peers vote and their friends vote. And that energy was really amazing to see. And it was amazing to capitalize on it. I'm not sure how much data there is out yet, but I mean, I think the youth vote was very, very high in the most recent election. And it's our job as people who really work in this space to make sure that we don't lose that momentum, that we can really keep that up going forward into every election that's going to come, generals, midterms, local, state, all sorts of stuff like that.
Yeah.
I also think something that was interesting, especially in 2020, and just because I do a lot of comms work, like to see campaigns utilizing social media was so fascinating. And it's like partially the reason like I decided to do my senior thesis on it. But I think like you would see like, especially the rise of TikTok during COVID, like seeing presidential campaigns like kind of try to tap into that and like get support like at young people through that way. Like I remember I saw one influencer who was literally like, the only reason I voted was because I wanted to do the TikTok trend where you like had your I voted sticker. And I was like, what is happening? But like, it's such an interesting influence, I think. And so like seeing campaigns kind of like realize that and like tap into like utilizing social media in a more like purposeful way. And I know at Duke, like we did a really big push on social media to get information out to voters because like we're very nonpartisan. We just want you to vote. Like we don't care who you vote for. And I think that it's an interesting way to also kind of like address some barriers because I know for a lot of college campuses, a lot of students don't have like transportation and they don't have a polling place on their campus. And so like being like, this is a very easy way to get to this polling place, very clear directions, or like doing like ride share events, stuff like that. Was interesting techniques to come out of 2020, I think, as well.
Yeah. No, actually, the number one questions, because I'm a young Gen Z, whatever they call us. Uh, the number one question I get from a lot of campaigns I'll be in is, do you know how to use TikTok? And how can we get our candidate on TikTok? It's like, and I'm not, I like TikTok, but I let the social media people handle that. But it was crazy to see that. Now all the candidates I do work with are on TikTok. I'm not in that sphere, but I definitely support it. And yeah, no, it was definitely a tumultuous year for that. And top to bottom, on the bottom races, like I didn't work in any presidential race, but I did work in the local races, a mayor's race and a supervisor and a bunch of city council members that I supported. So I think it was a great year to get civically engaged and more activated than 2016, because 2016 was really a push where I saw a lot of youth who started turning their heads and saying, what is going on in the world? But I'm going to ask you all a very simple question. There's really only one answer, but I'd love to hear if you have another answer. Is voting important?
Yes, but I have a reason for it.
Okay.
Um, I like to think of voting as a necessary yet insufficient part of a healthy democracy. So necessary in the fact that no fundamental change ever gets passed without votes being cast for it. No politician ever is responsive to their electorate if they don't vote. It's completely crucial. If there is no voting, there is no democracy, there is no change, there's no representation. Insufficient because it's not enough. Just voting alone is also not enough to pass any sort of fundamental change. Just voting enough is not enough to get politicians to listen to you. It isn't enough to show up at a polling place and pick a name on the ballot. That's one of the things that I think we and a lot of the pro-voter organizations focus on, because to a certain extent, pro-voter is an oversimplification. A lot of civic engagement work comes from a holistic view that it's not just voting, it's being engaged in the political process at every level. It's not just voting for politicians, it's knowing who they are, it's showing up to town halls, it's helping your friends get out to vote, it's being informed, it's helping other people stay informed. So I think voting is incredibly important. But I do not at all dispute any of the critiques about it being limited, because it is crucial, but absolutely not enough.
Oh, we all agree voting is important. It just went dead silent. I'm like, oh, do we have any objections?
No, I didn't know if Sean was going to jump in, but I mean, I completely agree with what Jack just said. Obviously, we think voting is important, or we wouldn't work for every vote counts. We wouldn't do the work that we do. But I think he's exactly correct. Like, it's not enough to just cast a vote. Like, you need to like understand what's going on in your community, find ways to like get other people engaged. We just participated, or when Every Vote Counts just participated in National Voter Education Week. And so every day kind of focused on a different thing, being like vote ready, ballot ready, mail ready. And it kind of addressed that, like, this idea where voting is so much more than just voting. Like, you need to make sure that like you're reaching out to like the people that you know, making sure that they're prepared, they know how they're going to cast their ballot, like they have a plan to vote. Like, if you can volunteer to be a poll worker, like volunteer to be a poll worker. Like, those are so important, such important parts of our democracy. Doing so much more than just showing up on election day, on early voting, or like mailing in your ballot. Like, doing all the other steps to make sure that you're aware and civically engaged makes a healthy democracy.
I would also agree that voting is important for sure.
I'm glad we all agreed. No contention. So that's great. And Jack, you had mentioned in your early, I guess, political career, you actually lobbied to have 17-year-olds vote. Which is interesting, because my next question is actually, should is a way to encourage young people, 16, 17-year-olds, to vote by allowing them to vote at their ages. It's something that cities like Oakland and Berkeley have instituted the youth vote in their school board elections. So I just wanted to grab your thoughts on should 16, 17-year-olds be allowed to vote, period, or be allowed to vote only in their school board elections, or maybe just their school board and city councils. What would you like to see to foster that sense of early voting?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not, at least as far as I know, I don't believe EVC has an official stance on expanding the electorate. So I cannot speak on behalf of every vote counts. I'm just speaking personally. I'm not going to pretend that I didn't do that. I think I don't have a very thought out opinion on this, but I think the question that I think is more interesting than why should 16-year-olds be able to vote is why not. Um, I don't think it's enough to accept that they can't now, and so then as a result they just shouldn't. But I cannot speak on behalf of every vote counts here. That's
Okay.
just coming from me alone. So
All right, we'll assume that's for everybody.
Yeah, same thing. EVC doesn't have a official position, so not speaking on behalf of the organization. But I mean, I pre-registered when I was 16 in high school. I think it's an important thing. I think it's something like we talked about, voting is habitual. Like the earlier you can get started, the more likely you are to vote when you're older. So it's kind of like, why not? You know, 16-year-olds can make informed decisions. They apply to college. No, you don't apply to college. You're 16. You're sorry. It's been a second since I applied to anything.
Yeah, I'm applying, so I'm not 16, by the
Yeah,
way.
no, you do. You make major life decisions though when you're 16. Like you start to think about colleges, you start to think about what you want to do. You're old enough to be like politically aware in what's happening in your world. So it's not like they would make extremely uninformed and irrational decisions. Like they're rational human beings, at least in my opinion.
I mean, I think if you're affected by the policies that elected officials are making, the onus is kind of on the people who are telling you you're not allowed to vote to explain why.
Right. My only point is, I mean, if you're in charge of creating the education curriculum, the textbooks, your route to school, who's building the roads, why is my traffic this high, which is an issue I've actually dealt with personally. So the fact that I didn't have a voice in the policies that were directly impacting me um, kind of made this question come to mind. And yes, I often use that too. Why not? What give me sufficient reasoning as to why they shouldn't be able to vote. Because it's mostly antiquated when I hear that answer. Uh, Now I wanna move on just because EVC doesn't have an official stance, but maybe they will after this, and y'all can come back and be like, "Wow, this was like breathtaking." But we see in states right now voter suppression being a very common theme in the United States. We see in Georgia, we see in Texas. Kind of talk about, I guess, why this is happening in your opinion, and what we can do as engaged people or to get people engaged in response to this.
there are, I think, a couple answers to the why. Um, there is the more sort of technical legal answer, which is
Right.
that Shelby County v. Holder, a Supreme Court decision, has made it much easier for state legislators to legislatures to pass restrictive voter measures that previously they would have had to send to the Department of Justice for approval. And now they don't because of a Supreme Court decision that um, has made this much easier. So that at least is why it's possible now. Why is it happening? It is often the case that people in power, when they are not prevented from doing so, will do whatever they feel like they can to remain in power. And this is exacerbated when the systems that put those people in power aren't as democratic or free and accessible as they could be. That's all sort of abstract. In a more also concrete, especially sort of American perspective, a lot of governmental institutions in America have a centuries long history of doing whatever they can within the strict limits of the law to prevent particularly people of color from participating in democracy as much as white people. And that has been part of American legal and electoral history for centuries. Um, how to stop this? Um, it's really hard. It requires, I think, work at both every level of government and organizing at sort of every level. Obviously, politicians who do these things, in at least my opinion, should not remain politicians. But it's important to sort of spread awareness about these policies, and particularly important to make it really clear that even laws that are on face neutral can have wildly disproportionate impacts on the ability of certain people to vote, um, to the point where at times it seems like they're almost designed to do so. Um, I think getting politicians into office who will support a National Voting Rights Act to make sure that people's right to vote is affirmative and can be protected and can't be infringed upon is crucial. But I guess the step one, especially for young people, is getting aware about stuff like this, becoming informed, helping your friends get informed, and getting involved at really every level in politics to make sure that especially the places around you are voting as accessible and free as possible.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Um, and not to say maybe we see, I guess we're starting to see a change in some of our leaders and I guess their methods and what they believe in, which is great. We see that movement building, but yeah, I'd have to say that it's a certain demographic that wants to keep their majority, and this is the extent to which they're assaulting our democratic processes, and we see that in various ways. For instance, calling voter fraud before an election has even happened. That happened recently in California, so I felt the need to bring it up. um, but yeah, no, it's definitely. I think it'll require. Excuse the word, but it'll require a shit ton of work to get this like to fight back. I mean, but I'm glad we have organizations like EBC who are doing that work and inspiring young people to get involved. And I guess I want to close out on a question I ask every guest, in this case guests, is that what would you recommend, to the next generation, Gen Z? Again, I don't know where they got Z from. It's literally a pet peeve of mine. They randomly chose a letter and was like, that's the youth. uh how can we make an impact on voting, elections, policy? How do we reach out to folks who aren't as involved as we are, who are ignorant, maybe don't care, maybe have been alienated, exhausted, they face those roadblocks, uh, and how do we get them to get on board? How do we get them to vote?
I think that, I mean, it's definitely like that is the question to end all questions. Like if we knew the answer to that question, we wouldn't have
Right.
issues.
That's why I asked the question, because if somebody knows
Uh,
the answer.
right. So I think that a lot of campaigns, a lot of organizations kind of work to answer that question. And I think, at least in my own experience, what I focus on is trying to make it personal. Because like politics, if they are anything, they are personal. And I think that sometimes people don't like talking about it because of that. But I think the most important thing is to just encourage people to understand how it affects their lives. And like EBC is so great because we can connect these partner organizations with each other and make these like personal politics have the connections to help and support each other. And I think if you have conversations with people who might be adverse to voting or not want to become politically engaged, and try to make them understand that like you can have a real impact even though it doesn't feel like it, that can make a huge difference. Like I have a lot of friends who are people who don't like politics, don't really vote, and like through like a series of like really difficult conversations and like willing to make yourself uncomfortable, and like willing to like put out your very like base true reasons like why you vote and why it's important to you, like it can encourage other people to like really reflect, and try to understand and like identify a why they should care and a why they should be involved. And I think it's important to remember that like civic engagement looks so different for so many people. Like not everyone is going to want to like run out and join political organizations, or like is going to want to campaign, is going to want to be as involved as some other people do. And like that's okay. Like this work isn't for everyone, but trying to encourage people to be engaged in their own ways and involved in their own ways, and like giving grace and space to understand that not everyone is the same, is something that I think is really important and that I try to emphasize when I do voter outreach, and recruitment.
Yeah, I also think it's really important to try to make a positive case for voting. Kind of connecting to the last question and just all the problems going on in society today. I think there's a lot of, a lot of people are very potentially apathetic, or they think it doesn't matter. They think, it's too late to change anything. And I think, trying to stay away from being like, oh my God, the sky is falling. Like, like this is, it's almost already too late. And, actually laying out the path to making a positive change and what people should want to do to be involved and to vote. Because of, not just because of the bad things that could happen if they don't, but because of the good things that can happen if they do. I think is really important. And above all, staying away from like the doomer, like oh my God, like like if you don't vote right now, like the democracy is dead. I think that turns off way more people than it actually brings in. And I think there's so much good in civic engagement and in being involved, that I think it's important to focus on that.
Yeah, and voting at the end of the day is an expression of hope, and faith in not just sort of your political system, but in all of your fellow citizens and your neighbors and the people you live with, and being able to point to examples of success, and being able to point to all of the incredible things that voting can do, and to bring in what Daisy mentioned also, to be able to show to people that if you want to help get out the vote, if you want to help build a healthier democracy and a more civically engaged community, you don't need to join a nonprofit or lobby in Congress or work for a campaign. Often the biggest thing that can get someone to vote is just their friend mentioning it to them. And if everyone were to just do that, have like a 5-minute conversation with a friend about getting out to vote, that would make a tremendous difference. And I think really that too, sort of making it personal for people, in the sense that what they need to do can just be interpersonal, I think is a really important first step in getting people involved. So yeah, I mean, I obviously agree with everything that Sean and Daisy said on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have any advice to my generation besides get involved. I am the generation. I think you all are Gen Z, right? We're all Gen Z. See?
Yeah, we're
Are we?
Gen Z also.
Are we just? I
I'm on
don't.
the cusp, I think. I was born in 99.
Oh no, my sister was born in 99. I think she. Yeah, I don't know. This is why I said Gen Z doesn't work, because I really don't know what it means. That's for a different day. Yeah, no, to get involved, and find your own niche. We all have our separate ways of activism. I've seen people dance, and that's a form of activism. People draw, be artistic. People use social media to become activists these days. There's separate criticisms about that, but it is an avenue to voice your opinion and encourage different thoughts. So yeah, no, and speaking of which, how can viewers stay updated on what you do with EVC? If you want to plug your social medias, this is the perfect time to do that. And I'll of course link them in the description.
Yes, would love to plug our social medias. As a social media director, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, EVC at EVC National. We love to post infographics. We love to like spotlight our partners, show what they're doing, and highlight anything and everything student voting related. So give us a follow on all platforms, and we will for sure keep you informed.
And when or if you get to college, join the EVC chapter if there is one. Join a blank votes, like a Duke votes, a Stanford votes if there is one. And if there's nothing like that, fill out a form on our website and we will help you start one. So
Fantastic. By the way, I'm not sponsored in any way by EVC, just to be clear. Although that could be a future discussion. And one thing I do ask is that since you're promoting yourself, I get to promote me on EVC. So y'all have to hit me back on Twitter, is all I'm saying. I'm very big on Twitter. Just a personal thing. Some people are TikTok, I am Twitter.
Well, quid pro quo going on there, but I think we can make
this
that
is the healthy quid pro quo. This is for democracy, okay? No, but is there anything any of you would like to add before we close? No. Wow.
Thank you so much for having us. This has been a really, really great experience. I've really enjoyed the conversation. We really appreciate you having us here on behalf of myself, but also all of Every Vote Counts. It's really wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. This is my part. And I love doing this show because I get to learn about what other people do and what they love to do. And that can act as inspiration most of the time. So no, thank you for what you do, because I guess we got to work together. We're all fighting the same battle, or war, maybe. I don't know. Mixed metaphors. You choose. So no, thank you so much for coming on the show. I do appreciate the insight, the college experience. I will be applying to college, so if any of you have any advice afterwards, please relay that. And I think what everybody here is doing and what EVC is doing is instrumental. And I wish you all the best of luck in your endeavors.
Thank you, and good luck to you as well, Kunal. Again, as Jack said, thanks so much for having us. It's been a great discussion. Super appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.